Parliament. And of course, we expect President Uhuru Kenyatta to grace this particular event. Bearing in mind, last year's event was held in State House, Nairobi, right after the country reported the first case of the coronavirus in our borders. And this time round, we'll definitely air the proceedings live as always, so do stay tuned to KTN News for that and much more. Allow us to have a brief discussion centered on what to expect even as the country takes this particular path. Joining us from our city center studios is Bishop David Oginde, who's a retired bishop at Christ is the Answer Ministries, better known as CITAM. Bishop, many thanks for your time and good morning. I'd like us to begin with the importance. How exactly is the National Prayer Breakfast important right now, especially with the timeliness? So much is happening in the country. Talk to us.
Thank you very much. Of course, prayers is very important for any nation and for any person or people. And so as the country, especially our leaders, gather together in the National Prayer Breakfast, it has a great significance, especially if it is taken seriously, because prayer indeed transforms people and transforms things. Where we are right now, the country has been in several kinds of crises. The first and the biggest, of course, is the corona pandemic that has been with us now for over a year. And we have been anticipating that this thing would come to an end. But what we are hearing is that there could be actually a fourth wave. So for the nation to come together and pray, there's a promise that God gives us that has been quoted many times, that when there are such kinds of things, of pestilences, invasions, and drought, and all kinds of calamities that come upon a nation, when God's people humble themselves, turn from their wicked ways, and call upon God, God has promised that He will hear and He will heal the land. So indeed, at this time when we have this pandemic upon us, if our people turn to God with sincerity and turn away from some of the wicked things that we have seen in our nation, God will hear and will heal our land. There are nations right now that some places that have been declared corona-free, and we can join that list of nations that are corona-free if we trust in God. The second problem that we have been facing is the political scenario. We have had a very, very tense moment in our political arena, with all kinds of things happening in various political parties. And this is building a lot of tension in the country, especially as we go to 2022. Yet again, we can actually pray that this storm that is coming upon the major parties of our country can subside and people can go into an election that is not very highly contested and with a lot of tension that could end us up in a crisis come 2022. So this is something that we again can call upon God and trust that He will diffuse the tensions that are there. There will be understanding among the leaders of the various political parties, that there will be a working together even when we do not see things in the same way. This is our prayer, this is our trust. And so this prayer comes in at a very critical point in our country.
Well noted, Bishop, but we well know that leaders are ordained by God, one way or the other. But I have to ask, where do you think the disconnect is between faith and governance? Because we well know of the dilemma, especially when it comes to moral values, when we look at the leadership, at the people at the helm. What's your take on this?
Thank you. Indeed, leaders are appointed by God, but leaders have a personal responsibility because our relationship with God, God has designed it. Let me put it that way. God has designed it that we are not like a computer. You know, in a computer, you feed in the information, all that the computer does is process that information. Computer does not have a mind of its own. But human beings have a mind, we have a mind of our own. And so even if God has appointed me a leader and given me a responsibility, it is still up to me to live in line with what God has called me to do and to do things in the right way. And that is why you find, especially in the Bible, leaders who are brought to account by God for whether they lived up to what they had been called to do or not. And that continues to this time. So leaders are given a responsibility from the lowest level of governance to the highest level of governance, but God expects them to give leadership in a way that is honoring to God, but also beneficial to the people that they lead. That is a responsibility that every leader has. It is unfortunate that in our country we have seen leadership that, first of all, sets aside the whole issue about God. So we don't see the fear of God in our leaders, or let me say some of our leaders. Then we do not see a commitment to do things that are to the welfare of the people. This is very unfortunate. And again, in this prayer season, we can only pray that God will bring conviction into the hearts of the people and that the conscience of the people will be awoken. Because like we just saw what the Anti-Corruption Commission gave the other day about the levels of corruption and what they have been able to get out of people who have been in leadership before. It is very, very sad and very unfortunate. I pray that we'll get to a time when our leaders see leadership as service to the people, giving guidance to the people, but also honoring to God so that there's fear of God.
Well noted, Bishop, but I also have to challenge in one way or the other. Prayer without action is dead. Ever so often we see tough talk on such days, the National Prayer Breakfast, where people, leaders will come together and perhaps give a stern message against vices like corruption. But these vices seem deeply entrenched in the society. Ever so often we hear talks of if you're too clean, if you're not corrupt, you won't get anywhere in life. So it seems the issue is with implementation even after prayers. Well, what say you about this?
Very true. Jesus talked about people calling him Lord, Lord. He said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and you do not do the things that I tell you? One of the most serious things that any human being can do with his God is to pay lip service. God judges people very, very seriously when they call his name in vain. And so it is a very serious thing for any person to stand at the altar of God. And that altar today is going to be on the Senate grounds, because where the name of God is called, he is there. So that may not be a normal church ground or a normal place of worship, but the fact that people are gathered there in the name of God, God is there, and that becomes holy ground. So it is a very serious thing for anybody to stand in that holy ground and utter words that they know for a fact they are not going to do, or they are not committed to doing, and yet present themselves as a people who are God-fearing and are going to honor God in all that they do. That brings very serious judgment upon people. And I can tell you for a fact, there are people in this country who have been seriously judged by God. And you see the way their lives have gone. Some of them have passed away in very mysterious circumstances. It is just that in these days we do not document some of these things so that people can know that God of the Old Testament, who struck people dead, is still alive. And so you cannot stand in the presence of God make promises that you know very well you are not going to do. It is a very sad thing. So I would personally urge our leaders, who at whichever level we are in, let the fear of God rule in our hearts, and let us do things that, if we have made a promise to God, let us do that which we have promised to do. And God will bring his blessing upon us in ways that we have never even imagined.
Well noted, Bishop. I mean, and ever so often we hear this, that Kenya has one of the best laws, so to speak. I can call out Article 10 of the Constitution, which encompasses national values there. But what happens is, and what we've mentioned, implementation at times is the issue. My question, how exactly do we bring about social transformation? Because it's not just the leaders who are in question right now, the society in general is. How do we bring about a social transformation, especially when it comes to adherence by law? Is the National Prayer Breakfast such a step?
Yes and no. Yes, in the fact that, as I said, prayer has a way of transforming the hearts of people. And so when we come to the place of prayer as individuals, there's a sense of the awe and fear of God that comes upon us. And it is possible, therefore, to get to that place where, because of our fear of God, we are able to do things in a way that honors God. So if a person sincerely goes into the presence of God, ready and willing to hear what God could be saying, that person will have a change of heart. And I can tell you, I have experienced it myself. Many people have experienced. They talk about how they went into the presence of God and their lives, their thinking, their way of looking at things was changed, was transformed. So prayer has a way of reaching our hearts so that we can be able to hear what God is saying, and we can be inclined towards doing what God expects us to do. But I say no because ultimately I have to make a choice within myself that I'm going to do what God tells me to do. You may be familiar with a story in the Bible about a prophet named Jonah. This was a prophet. This was not an ordinary person. A prophet is a person who hears from God and speaks to people about what God has said. So he hears the voice of God telling him to go to the city of Nineveh and preach to them. But Jonah feels he is not going to do this. So he goes in the opposite direction. He takes a ship to Tarshish to go in the opposite direction. So it tells you that hearing God alone is not enough. I have to choose to follow what God has said. Prayer by itself is not enough. It will not change anything if we are not committed to doing what we have prayed about. The second thing about law, again, the law is there to guide. It's a guide. Law is a guide. When I come to traffic lights and I see a red light, that red light is a guide. It is telling me that it is dangerous for you to get into the junction at this point, because there could be other vehicles coming from other directions and you could have an accident. That's all that red light is saying to me. So my interpretation that this is a guide helped me then to stop and wait and allow other people to go. When green comes, green is telling me now the road is clear, it is your turn, you can move on. And I choose to move on. Now, there are people, when they come to a red light, they see it as an obstacle. It's a distraction. It is wasting my time. I'm in a hurry. I need to go. And so they get right in. And many times they get into an accident because their interpretation of that red light is that it is distracting them, it is delaying them, it's a bother to them, and so they will go through that red light. And that is what law is all about. Law is a guide to bring order within a country, to bring order within a nation, to bring order within an organization. So when we see laws, guidelines, regulations as obstacles, then we try to find ways to go around about them. It is very sad in this country that the laws that we have put for ourselves have become simple obstacles that people find ways on how to circumvent them. This is a change of attitude that needs to take place, and it begins with leadership. John Maxwell has said, everything rises and falls on leadership. So our leaders must begin to give us examples, set example on how to live within the laws that we have set for ourselves, the guidelines that we have set for ourselves, the values that we have espoused. This is what will bring about national transformation.
Okay, well noted. And Bishop, just looking at your Twitter account, I can see you're quite active. No shepherd slaughters his sheep in a moment of rage, that being your last tweet. But let's talk about something that usually sparks debate on social media. And we see so many Kenyans lament as the electorate, yet we have the power of the ballot. We can choose the type of leaders we want. And I want to interrogate the role of the church in this. Can we see a day where Kenyans exercise their democratic right and elect leaders who have the moral authority? Or where is the missing link? Because at times we vote as the electorate, but when they get to the bicameral house, there's a change in focus, a change in direction. And what is the role of the church in all of this?
Very good question. The church has a very significant role. In fact, I can tell you that right now we are working on a summit that is coming up in June, 16th to 18th of June, where we are actually going to interrogate the whole issue of the relationship between the church and politics. What is the role of the church in the political arena and in political engagement? How should we help our citizens, and particularly the Christians, on how we engage with politics? Because what we have seen in our country is a situation where politics has been so highly elevated beyond anything else. In this country, Kenya, politics brings to a standstill everything. Business, every kind of life comes to a standstill when it comes to politics. And this is not good for the country. So you find, therefore, that when we come to electing leaders, it is not the fundamental issues that guide our electoral process. The issues of tribe, for example, take preeminence, the issues of clanism, the issues of who can give the most money during campaigns. These are the things that really lead towards the people that we elect. And no wonder then we elect these people, they get into parliament, and only a few days, only a few weeks down the road, months down the road, we are ready to get rid of them. We don't like the very things that, the very people that we have elected. It is a total contradiction, because when you hear Kenyans talk about their leaders, you would think that leaders came from hell. But we are the ones who selected them. We are the ones who elected them. We are the ones who put them in leadership. So there's something drastically wrong with the way we do politics in our country and how we elect leaders. And so we as a church, we are coming together to try and educate our members on what should you look for in an electoral process. What kind of leader should you be looking for? And how can we get these leaders? And even after they have been elected, how can we hold these people to account? How can we work together with them? How can we support good leaders to do a good job? All these are things that we are going to be discussing in the summit, appreciating that the church has not done as much as we ought to have done in giving direction to the political agenda of the country. But I believe this can be changed, and we are going to be looking at that.
Okay, well, I like how you speak. You're speaking of an ideal situation, especially at a time when the church itself has come under criticism from certain sectors of the public in terms of using the pulpit to pass a certain agenda, especially when it comes to the political agenda in the country. Perhaps you could be the defender this time round and explain to us how exactly the church might shift focus, because ever so often we see leaders with certain agendas given time to speak to the faithful in the church, in the holy shrines. And this definitely leaves a bad taste, especially when it comes to issues to do with national ethos and values. Talk to us, Bishop.
Indeed, and you are very right. And those are the things that are concerning us as a Christian community, as a church. And that is why this conversation is going to be so critical. Let me put it this way. Politics has really captured the life of our country. I don't know of any other country where people do politics day and night, 365 days in a year, and from one election to another. When we completed the 2017 elections, we started campaigns for 2022. When we are going to complete 2022 elections, we'll be starting campaigns for 2027. I don't know that there's any country that does that. And if they are, perhaps they are in a similar situation like we are in. So politics drives everything that we do. And this has tainted the way we do business. This has tainted the way we worship. This has tainted the way we run our lives, because our lives revolve around politics. Politicians have become our gods. They determine how we do things. So you find in an environment where we are in, when a politician walks into a church, when a politician walks into a gathering or meeting of any kind, everything comes to a standstill. We change our focus from whatever it is we were doing to turn to Mheshimiwa. That is a very unfortunate situation. Indeed, we should give respect to whom respect is due, honor to whom honor is due, but we should not be paralyzed and captivated by politics in such a way that politicians have become almost like gods in our country. And that is one of the things we definitely want to address during this Church and Politics Summit that is coming up in just about 3 weeks' time.
Okay, Bishop, kindly stay with me. We have Bishop David Oginde in our City Center studios. Allow us to take a short break. When we come back, of course, we'll continue with this particular conversation, of course, in the run-up to the 18th